I stood in front of the office building for nearly an hour before he came out. Once, I had hurt him and changed his life. Now someone had done the same to me, in a similar way and almost exactly 12 years later. I don't really believe in karma, but a part of me couldn't help but connect his situation to mine. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, even if I knew it didn't make much sense. People are good at spotting patterns. We notice them everywhere. But sometimes we see patterns where there are none. In this case, I chose to give in to my strange thoughts and follow where they led, just to quiet that nagging feeling inside me. An apology was overdue anyway. That's what I told myself as I waited nervously for my long-overdue meeting with Lance Jenkins. I was going to apologize, even though I understood how little that could actually change things. I had thought I understood it before, but I was too young back then to really get it. They say time makes fools of us all. Looking back, I felt like the biggest fool of all. On my first day in my new house, the people in the Kings Forest neighborhood watched me as I unloaded my few belongings from a small moving truck into a home that felt far too big for me. No one came to talk to me that day. I seemed too much of a mystery for them to approach easily. I was clearly too young to own a house there. Was I the son of the real owners, home from college? But if that was true, where were they? Maybe I was just watching the house until they moved in, but then why use a moving truck? I didn't realize it at the time, but those were the questions buzzing in the neighborhood chat. The next day, they sent someone to check on me. It was the youngest resident, who lived a few doors down. If they wanted to learn more about me, someone friendly would be a good choice. On my doorstep that second day stood a young woman with blonde hair. She looked like she was in her 20s but was actually a mother of two, Hunter and Zoe, aged 4 and 2 respectively. She greeted me with a smile that felt welcoming. "Hi, neighbor. I thought I'd swing by to introduce myself," she said, extending her hand. I wasn't sure if I should shake it or just nod. "I'm Eleanora Jenkins." A handshake felt like the right choice. "I'm Doug Richards. Nice to meet you." She smiled warmly at first, but then looked a bit puzzled as I held her hand longer than I should have. Finally realizing my mistake, I let go and said awkwardly, "Would you like to come in? I only have water and Coke, though." Her smile returned. "I'd be happy to help, Doug." She stepped inside, giving me a chance to notice her look without feeling bad about it. Eleanora, or Ella for short, had dressed casually to greet me. Yoga pants, a loose t-shirt, running shoes, and a ring on her left hand. The ring was a little surprising, but the rest caught my eye. Still, her outfit wasn't the main thing on my mind. I could tell she felt confident, and her strong build made her features stand out. As she moved, her shirt shifted, showing hints of her tanned skin that added to her charm. I realized for the first time how much I appreciated her presence. Ella looked around my living room, which had an old futon, a wobbly table, my stereo, and the new Wi-Fi router. "Still getting settled in?" "A little, yes." This was pretty much all I owned, but I knew how that might seem. "I need to get some things from storage and my parents' house." "Oh, so you own this place?" She sounded surprised, making me a bit uncomfortable. It shouldn't have bothered me, but judgment can make anyone feel small. I decided to just be honest. My uncle passed away recently, and he left me some money. Not enough to last forever, but I gestured around. After talking to friends and family, buying a house in a nice area seemed like a good idea. I'm also starting my own business, but her expression shifted right away. "Oh, that's great. I'm sorry about your uncle, but I know he'd be proud of how you're using the money. You really should meet my husband, Lance. He's great with business management. He can help you get started." "Wow, that would be amazing. I'm not sure how much I can pay, since I'm mainly living off what I inherited. I've got some contract work coming in, but—" Ella shook her head and raised a hand to stop me. "Don't worry about that. You're our neighbor, and we've been in your shoes trying to start a business from nothing. He'll be happy to help." After settling that, we chatted a bit more about her family. She and Lance met in college and had been married for 7 years. They moved into the neighborhood 3 years ago, leaving a small apartment that was too tight for them and their first child, and now they had another one on the way. While I bought my home at a low point after the 2007 financial crisis, they had purchased theirs at a high, which put some stress on her husband. She had planned to return to work using her degree in early childhood education, but Lance convinced her that the costs of childcare and her salary would not cover each other, so she decided to stay home and manage their household. She did earn a little money on the side as a personal trainer, which made sense, as she was a great example of her work. When Ella talked about her husband, her face lit up with real joy. She was friendly, but also made it clear where her loyalties were. I remember thinking that I hoped to have a partner as devoted as she was one day. Eventually, she had to leave. As she walked away, I noticed how gracefully she moved. She seemed to know how much people looked at her, and it was clear she felt good about herself. That was how I made my first friend in the King's Forest neighborhood. I wished she didn't wear that ring, but if she hadn't, well, hindsight is perfect, and maybe it was a lucky break for me. On the third day, a group came to my door. They called themselves the Welcome Wagon, but they were really the important people in the neighborhood. Their husbands worked on the Homeowners Association, and those with kids in school were involved in the Parent-Teacher Association. If there was a group, they were part of it. If there wasn't, they started one. Their scout had brought them news about the newcomer, and now they wanted to see for themselves. Looking back, I now see it was really a way to decide if I would cause trouble. I didn't fit their idea of who should live in King's Forest. They thought someone like a college-age kid might be okay, but a homeowner? What kind of example would I be? Think of the children. But they didn't seem rude. Instead, they looked like a group of moms, along with a few grandmothers, who had too much time and not enough to do. I thought they were mostly harmless, even as I tried to be friendly and open when they asked questions. My mom had similar encounters when we moved as kids, and I knew I had nothing to hide, so being honest felt like the best choice. I realize now how naive that was, but at the time, it seemed right. But it worked. Ella may have said I was a good person, but some of them, especially the older members, expected a noisy, careless college kid causing trouble. Sure, Ella had told them I was safe, but she wasn't much older than me, with only 8 years between us. They could trust her to get information from me, but how accurate it was might have been a different story. What they found, though, was just a quiet, simple nerd. I only had water and Coke to offer, which made my guests feel more at ease. My house wasn't filled with furniture, but I kept it tidy and started to make some small repairs. More importantly, I was busy with work when they rang the doorbell, showing them I was responsible. I answered their questions well, and they seemed to like me. One of the grandmas thought I seemed too perfect, comparing me to a character from an old show I had to look up. Overall, they decided that even if I didn't completely fit in, it didn't mean I couldn't find my place. They were just the right people to help me feel at home, and their husbands were ready to support me too. From then on, I became their project. Everything moved faster than I expected. Mrs. Taylor stopped by first and pointed out that I needed more furniture. She kindly offered her advice as an interior decorator to help make my space nicer. Next, Mrs. Cartwright suggested I might want a better wardrobe, and she was eager to help me pick out some new clothes. Then came Mrs. Baker, a former hairstylist, who offered to help me with my hair. Mrs. Alvarez, a retired cooking teacher, suggested adding more variety to my meals beyond just mac and cheese and frozen food. Finally, Mrs. Redmond, the dance teacher, visited after noticing I had some trouble one day, which maybe made her question my commitment to learning. Last to show up was Kathy Grayson, the grandmother who had wondered about me since I seemed quite ordinary. Though she came last, she held a special role among the women in the neighborhood. Kathy and her husband, Bob, were older than most of my neighbors, acting like wise guides, helping others with advice about the challenges that life brought. Kathy didn't come later because she disliked me. She just waited until I was ready to accept her help. She taught me valuable life lessons. Learning how to dress, cook, and interact well was important, but if I struggled to talk with people, it wouldn't matter. She showed me how to chat, connect, and engage with others. The time we spent together greatly influenced my success both personally and in my job. Her husband, Bob, welcomed me into the group of husbands right away. He was the first man to stop and chat with me, warmly greeting me as we walked past each other on the sidewalk. Bob had a strong presence and the politeness of a church leader, as he had once been one. He took me to a Friday game, and from that moment on, the group accepted me as one of their own. After a tough night at the game, they welcomed me in. My journey to be accepted among the leaders of King's Forest began. One Saturday morning, Mr. Baker saw me struggling with an old push mower. He offered me a nearly new self-propelled one that he no longer needed because he had bought a riding mower. The other husbands joined in too, bringing over tools and lawn care gear to help me out. When they noticed I was missing something, they discussed it loudly until they agreed on what I should think about getting and where to find good deals. Along with the tools, they shared their knowledge during friendly get-togethers, which sometimes included drinks. The husbands showed me how good men like to spend their free time, playing golf, telling stories, and enjoying each other's company. Grayson, Alvarez, Baker, Ron Cartwright, and Bill Redmond enjoyed boating and fishing together. I sometimes joined them at the local sports bar. While I didn't share their hobbies as much as they might have hoped, the focus was on making connections. They were teaching me about male friendship and how it was different from hanging out with my college friends. I have to admit, I didn't always agree with their ways of bonding. There was a lot of competition among them, which I expected. However, their humor often caught me off guard. They often told funny stories about the challenges of marriage and made light of small annoyances, joking about hiding their purchases from their wives. While humor can help to relax, I started to wonder if some of these men really appreciated their wives or if they stayed together out of duty. The variety of things they talked about buying might seem expensive, but it was more about friendship than money. After that first poker night, none of them asked for anything in return for their time. They either lent me items they already had or only asked for the cost of supplies. I often wondered if their kindness came from neighborly feelings, boredom, or encouragement from their wives. I began to feel like a substitute son to many of them. Even though they had kids around my age, their children didn't seem to connect with them like I did. I understood this situation well. I had chosen to settle in the town where I went to college to start this new chapter of my life, separate from my parents. I appreciated my family's opinions, but they couldn't offer the specific help that my neighbors did, as they saw me more as their child than as a young adult. The couples in my neighborhood, especially the men, viewed me as a young man who needed guidance on becoming an adult. They didn't feel responsible for my decisions. I was free to make mistakes after they shared their best advice. They kept their worries to themselves, which allowed them to give advice that might have seemed inappropriate coming from parents. I felt a special bond with Bob Grayson. Of all the men in the neighborhood, he reminded me the most of my father, even though he was nearly 10 years older. They shared the same beliefs, had similar jobs, and both served as leaders in their churches. They held similar views on life. Work hard, stay true to your faith, and keep your promises. I might have had different opinions about some things, but I agreed with the overall message. More than the others, I turned to him for advice when I was uncertain about what to do. He also liked the old Western movies my dad enjoyed. Some nights he would come to my house or I would visit him, and we would watch classic films, either the old black and white ones or spaghetti westerns. Bob could probably recite many of them, but he still loved watching them again and again. I think he enjoyed it less for the movies and more for the time spent with me. Kathy shared that he and his son used to watch one together almost every night after dinner, but their son had moved to Europe over 10 years ago and started his own family. Even though Bob acted like a father figure to me, I filled the role of the son he missed. On the younger side, Lance and Ella were closest to my age. Lance was very busy with his work, but he made time, at Ella's insistence, to help me find my way. He wasn't exactly a friend, but he was kind and very wise. I have many regrets about this period, and not getting to know him better is one of them. Maybe I would have made better choices if I had. Ella, the healthiest woman in the neighborhood, took charge of my exercise routine. I have to admit I looked forward to my time with her each week, even if I felt a bit guilty for admiring a married woman. She didn't seem to mind. Out of all the women in the neighborhood, she appeared the friendliest. Still, nothing beyond friendship occurred between us. Even though I liked Lance, I respected the limits that came with being married. At least that's what I believed. That certainty had never been challenged back then. As time went on, I started to see her as my friend, not just someone I looked up to. She would often stop by just to say hi or bring her kids over to play in my pool. I enjoyed getting to know her as a person instead of just an idea. I noticed something else when I was with the other neighbors. The couples were my friends and Ella's friends, but they didn't seem to be Lance's friends. He was Ella's husband, but I didn't get the feeling he was really included in their group. Although I suspected they wouldn't say it out loud, I sensed it pretty often. Still, it didn't bother me much at the time. He was a busy guy and not very outgoing. My parents probably had similar relationships with their neighbors, so I decided not to think about it too much. Regardless of my mentor's reasons, I learned more useful skills in those first 10 months of owning a home than I did in 4 years of college. My neighbors helped change me from a shy person who found it hard to talk to others into a confident home and business owner. They took a chance on me professionally, too. I worked on designing websites and later apps for many of their businesses, helping them have a stronger online presence. They were grateful and began to refer me to their friends. My social life, which is a big deal for a man in his early 20s, improved a lot. As a single young homeowner and entrepreneur who could dance, cook, and hold good conversations, I found many opportunities. The neighbors often joked about the activity at my house. One morning, Mrs. Alvarez winked at me as I walked a guest to her car. Another time, Ella laughed and said, "Wow, I didn't know you had such a full social life." I can't thank my neighbors enough for what they taught me and for helping me improve my social life and business. I will always appreciate the time they spent on me from the start. But for everything that happened after? Not so much. My troubles with the people in King's Forest started with a simple mistake. I woke up on a Tuesday thinking it was Wednesday. My software consulting business was doing well, and I got so caught up in my work that the days started blending together. That Tuesday morning, I woke up just before noon after sleeping through my alarm. My workouts with Ella were set for 1 in the afternoon on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, so I hurried to get ready and headed down the street to her and Lance's house. I rang the bell, but no one answered. I listened closely and heard some sounds coming from inside. That didn't surprise me much since Ella usually warmed up before I got there. Thinking she had her earbuds in, I walked to the backyard, planning to knock on the sliding glass door. Instead, I found it slightly open. That's not all I found. I heard a voice from inside before I could see anything, sounding frustrated. Ella was making a lot of noise, clearly very animated. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. But then I heard a sound that could only mean she was in trouble. I turned the corner, ready to help my friend. Ella seemed to need help, but not in the way I expected. It was clear someone was being rude to her, and she was not happy about it. The guy didn't seem special, just an ordinary man, a bit older and fit, with a scruffy look. The situation worried me. There was nothing impressive about how he treated her, and she didn't seem any more involved than she had on the casual dates I'd seen her on before. But she was everything I had thought about, even if I felt guilty for it. She looked amazing, and her reactions to him were striking. They weren't fully undressed. He had pushed her shirt up a bit, and her pants were adjusted just enough for him to get close. The word that came to mind as I watched was disrespect. I stood there for what felt like a long time, overwhelmed by many different feelings. I was shocked by what I saw, worried about Ella, angry for her, and jealous of this random guy. Why would she be with him? What made him special? Later, I felt shame about being jealous, but I couldn't help it. She and I had gotten close in the past months, and even though I told myself I wouldn't have tried to approach her for my own reasons, it still hurt a little. I was still young and allowed to have some naive views. Of course, she wouldn't think of me for this. It could complicate her life in ways I didn't understand, but it still stung. Even if you don't want to dance, it feels good to be asked. I was about to say something when he made a rude comment. Ella reacted quickly, surprising me. It seemed her training really helped. In a smooth motion, she stood up for herself. "I told you, don't ever talk about Lance like that. You're only here because he's not. I'd pick him every day if I could. If you disrespect him again..." I missed the rest of what she said as I stepped back, hoping she hadn't spotted me. As I quietly slipped out the sliding glass door and closed it behind me, I heard angry voices. It seemed like playtime was over. Ella's fierce words in defense of Lance left me feeling more confused than ever. She was being unfaithful. But then I wondered, wait, Is she unfaithful, or do they have an open marriage? I didn't know any couples like that, or at least I didn't think I did. I never got a strange vibe from either of them. Besides, Ella had reacted so strongly that I couldn't believe Lance knew and was okay with it. I hurried away from her house and into the nearby alley, trying to think about what to do next. Should I tell Lance? Confront Ella? Keep quiet until I had more information? Or, of course, go talk to someone I trusted, someone who had been helping me for months and knew Ella and Lance much longer. The Alvarez's house was closer, but she was watching Ella's kids. So I decided to head to the Taylors instead, interrupting Mary Taylor's Tuesday afternoon. After ringing the doorbell, I looked back nervously, feeling tense. Mary opened the door, noticing my anxiety. "Doug, what's wrong?" "Mrs. Taylor." "Call me Mary, please. You make me feel old when you say Mrs. Taylor." I glanced at Ella's house again. "Mary, please. I really need to talk to someone." "Okay, come in. I'm happy to listen." I stepped inside, trying to find the right words for our conversation. She put her hand on my shoulder, smiled kindly, and guided me toward her couch. "Doug, whatever it is, it's going to be okay." I couldn't hold it in any longer. I blurted out, "Ella is being unfaithful to Lance." Mary's smile froze for a moment before returning, sweeter but still a bit forced. "What are you talking about, dear?" "It's Wednesday. We work out today and Doug, it's Tuesday. Just listen." She stepped back at my intensity and I felt bad. "I'm sorry. Yes, it's Tuesday, but I thought it was Wednesday. We always work out on Wednesday at 1. So when I knocked and Ella didn't answer, I went to the back and opened the sliding glass door. That's when I found them, Ella and another man." "Are you sure they were—" I scoffed. "Unless she started doing yoga for 2, yes. They were definitely being intimate, and it sounded like it wasn't the first time." Mary bit her lip. "Did she see you?" "I don't think so." I sighed, looking off into space. "I can't believe she's doing this to him." "She always acts like she thinks Lance is amazing." Slowly, Mary said, "Well, maybe she does." I turned to her, ready to argue, but she continued. "Hear me out. Maybe she loves him. Maybe she just has needs he can't meet right now and—" "Okay, no. Just no. No one who truly cares for their partner would betray them like that. Even if—" She leaned in a bit. "Even if?" I looked away, feeling uncomfortable about how I needed to speak with an older woman. It felt wrong. While they were together, the guy spoke poorly of Lance, and Ella reacted strongly. She told him to never say anything like that again. She said she would choose Lance every day if she could. Mary seemed to think about this. "Sounds like you heard that from her directly." "Doug." She placed her hand on my knee. "Sometimes people can't get what they need from their loved ones, especially when they really need it. Lance works long hours, and as I've said, she is a young woman with needs. If he can't meet those—" I was shocked. Surely she couldn't mean what I thought she did. "Doug, listen. You've said it yourself. She cares for Lance. He cares for her and their kids, and for the life they have together. Is what she's doing right? I wouldn't say so. But if having some distractions is how she gets what she needs when Lance is busy, what's worse, her actions or you telling him?" I was stunned. I stammered, How can you justify it?" "Oh, sweetie, I'm not justifying her choices. I'm thinking about their happiness, Lance's included. If he finds out, it could ruin their marriage." "Maybe it should." "Doug, you don't mean that. She loves him and he loves her. And think about their kids. Can you imagine how they would feel? Divorce is hard for children. It's usually toughest on them, even though the parents often don't realize it. I know this from experience." "What do you mean?" "My parents divorced when I was about Hunter's age. It was terrible. Their split caused so many issues. I never understood why Mama suddenly seemed angry with Daddy, and why I could only see him once a month in his small apartment. It was tough seeing him like that. He had lost so much weight, and his smile just wasn't—" Mary's voice broke. "It wasn't the same." She took a tissue from the box on her coffee table and dabbed her eyes. "I didn't know then, but Daddy had been unfaithful, and Mama wanted to take control of the situation. She did just that in the divorce. Excuse my language." She looked a bit embarrassed for her earlier words, but I chuckled and encouraged her to go on. Mary looked down at the tissue in her hands. My older sister understood more about what was happening and sided with Mama. She was old enough to realize that Daddy was being unfaithful, though she didn't truly understand what that meant. Her gaze turned back to me. She also couldn't grasp why someone would be unfaithful. With only a couple of days a month spent with us, and no way to explain to her why he had been spending time with another woman, he couldn't tell his 8-year-old daughter, "Mommy hasn't wanted to be close since your sister was born, and I made a mistake." I was a daddy's girl, so I stood by him, but Sharon, my sister, didn't, and this caused issues between us. It also created tension between her and Daddy, and even with Mama once I grew up a bit and still didn't take her side. Most of those issues healed over time, but the marks remain. To this day, I think Mama trusts Sharon more than me. I know Sharon feels hurt by Daddy because of his choices, even if she understands them now. Mary sighed. I wish Daddy hadn't made those choices. They were wrong, I know that. But I wish Mama could understand his struggles and how unhappy he had been. She shook her head. But that's not Lance and Ella's marriage. Their relationship is a happy one. Please don't disrupt that. Things are getting better. The economy is improving, slowly but surely, and he is home more often now. I felt uneasy. As I thought over her words, something clicked. I never said he was some CrossFit guy. You've known about this for a while, haven't you? There was a brief pause before she admitted, I have. How did you find out? Did she tell you or did you see them together? Mary chose her words carefully. No, I found out secondhand. Julia Alvarez. Found them when she had to drop off Hunter and Zoe early with Ella. And she told you? No. She told Teresa, who, well, you know how she is. She told a few others, including me. I blinked a few times before responding. A few others? How many people know about this? Maybe a dozen. A dozen people know about this? Couples. About a dozen couples. She bit her lip, wincing slightly. Give or take. A dozen couples. I slumped back on the couch, more surprised by this new information than by Ella's situation. 24 people, give or take. My friends and neighbors knew that our friend was being unfaithful and hadn't told him. Or me. It bothered me that they had kept this secret from him. No matter how Mary might have justified it, it wasn't right. But it also hurt to know that everyone around me knew and I was left in the dark. If it had been a well-kept secret, that would be one thing, but nearly everyone I cared about in my neighborhood had known. I felt embarrassed for thinking they saw me as a friend or even close to one. I always heard that the husband is the last to know. I guess that's still true, but... I shook my head, laughing without much joy. Mary reached out to touch my shoulder. Doug, please don't misunderstand. No one was trying to keep this from you to leave you out. We care a lot about you. All of us. That's why we didn't say anything. We didn't want to put this heavy secret on you. If you didn't know, you wouldn't have to worry about it. You still don't know, though. I hope you can see that. As a group, we decided not to say anything because we want their family to be happy. We know you want that too, but also that... She smiled, looking a bit sad. When you are young, everything feels simple. We didn't want you to struggle with the hard parts. Not about this. After thinking for a bit, I stood up, and Mary stood up with me. Doug, please don't. I interrupted her, sounding a bit sharper than I meant. I'm not sure what I'm going to do just yet. I'm not doing anything tonight. But I need to go for a walk and think. She reached out to hug me, but I stepped back. I could see that hurt her. Good, I thought. Now she knows how it feels to be pushed away. Mrs. Taylor, it felt strange to call her Mary now, followed me to her door and asked again that I not tell Lance. I didn't answer, just mumbled a goodbye before letting the door close behind me. I walked around the neighborhood trying to clear my mind. There were at least 24 people. Maybe more. Did everyone in the neighborhood know? How could so many people stay quiet? The answer came quickly, because everyone liked Ella, and they thought at least okay of Lance. No one really loved Lance. Maybe not even his wife, I thought sadly. How could someone who loved their partner act like that? I just didn't get it. If they had an understanding, like an open relationship, that might make more sense, but not this. I knew Ella cared for Lance, though. It wasn't fake. I had seen how devoted she was to him. She was always happy to talk about him, his job, their time in college, and their family. Once, at a party when she had a little too much to drink, she even boasted about how great a partner he was. I had never heard her say anything bad about him, except that she wished he could be home more. Even those comments showed how much she appreciated all he did for their family. I was so deep in my thoughts that I didn't notice I had walked back to my front steps. I glanced toward Lance and Ella's house, but everything was quiet. It usually was at that time of day, before the neighborhood kids got home from school. Work was not able to distract me much. The late-night coding marathon had given me some extra time, and without a deadline pushing me, I found it hard to focus on my work. I thought about making a late lunch, something more satisfying than the snack I had grabbed before rushing to find Ella with her friend. But I wasn't really hungry. Doing yard work wasn't an option either. I had mowed and trimmed just 2 days ago, and any outdoor tasks felt pointless now. The longer I searched for things to keep me busy, the more I wondered why Ella hadn't come by to talk. She must have realized I had seen her, even if she hadn't noticed me right away. It seemed strange to think that Mary Taylor would trust me alone to keep our neighbor's secret safe. I figured Ella might be giving me space to sort out my thoughts, or to plan what she would say, or maybe even to speak with Lance. I hoped for the last option. It would make things a lot easier for me. So, when the doorbell rang, I wasn't shocked. What did catch me off guard was who stood there. Bob Grayson greeted me with a big smile and a six-pack of my favorite beer in his hands. I thought you might need someone to talk to right now. He definitely knew. If anyone in the neighborhood was aware of the latest news, it was the Graysons. I felt the sting of being left out more than ever, but I accepted the beers. Yeah, I think I do. We sat at my kitchen table. We didn't say anything until we had opened a couple of bottles and taken a few drinks. Then he wanted me to share what I knew and what Mary had told me. He nodded thoughtfully as I spoke, asking questions to clarify points. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, took another sip, suppressed a burp, and sighed. This is tough. Pretty much. Doug, son, I know Mary has already mentioned this, but I want you to hear it from me. We didn't keep this from you because we didn't trust you. That's not it at all. Like she said, we didn't want to burden you with knowing. Kicking around that kind of information can weigh heavily on someone, even if they don't act on it. We know you're a good person, Doug. Reliable. Loyal. That's why we didn't tell you. We wanted to spare you the difficult choice of where your loyalty should lie. He gazed out the front window. Kids were coming home from school, laughing and running. A few looked hesitant to go home, and I felt for them. How long? I realized after talking with Mary that I didn't know some important details that might affect my decisions. How long has she been unfaithful to Lance? How long have you known? He tapped his fingers on the table, looking serious. After a few moments, he finally replied, From what I understand, it started a little over a year ago. I found out, along with many others, a few weeks later, just before you moved in. A year? How? You're a church elder. How did you agree to this? He frowned more deeply. I didn't agree, Doug. I made them agree. What? I could hardly believe it. Bob nodded. Not everyone. Some chose to stay out of it. Others, like Mary Taylor, had their own reasons. If their spouses weren't on the same page, they mostly convinced them. Honestly, I think a couple of people might be dealing with their own issues. I can't prove it, though. Just a feeling. After taking another drink, he continued sadly. Some thought we needed to tell him that it was the right thing to do. And it is. I know it is. But it can also be the wrong thing. Bob pointed his bottle at me. That brings me back to you and what you're dealing with. Nodding, I said, Yeah, I am. She's my friend, but he is too. I know not everyone feels the same. It seems like most here like Ella a lot more than Lance. Bob almost slammed his bottle down on the table. That is not true. He looked away for a moment, then shrugged, admitting, Okay, maybe it is for some, but it's not for me. And that's not why I argued so hard to keep this from him. He stopped, took a deep breath, and let it out slowly before standing to look out the window. Kathy didn't come with me today because she knew I'd probably end up telling this story. It bothers her. It bothers me too, but he shook his head. I'm trying to keep this from him because of what happened many years ago and what I fear could happen again. Not long after I became an elder, a big economic crisis hit. You might not remember it, but back in 1987, the stock market saw its biggest drop in history. Nearly 25% of the Dow Jones was lost in a single day. People thought we were heading for another Great Depression. A young family had started coming to our services about a year earlier. They were nice people. The parents loved each other very much, and they had adorable young kids. The father didn't lose his job when the recession hit, but it was a close call. Being young and without much experience, his job was at risk, and he had to do everything he could to keep it. So, he worked long hours and came home stressed. Tensions ran high. I didn't realize so many people were struggling in the community. To be honest, my own job was uncertain, and I was already trying to pay for my oldest child's college tuition. I didn't learn how bad things had gotten for them until the wife came to me about 8 or 9 months after the crash. She had made some poor choices. It happened a few times before she felt bad and asked for my advice. At first, I thought she should tell her husband right away. I was angry with her for what she had done. I felt sorry for her too, but I knew she was wrong. She had broken his trust. I still feel that way, just like I feel about what Ella is doing. For days, I tried to figure out what to say to her. Finally, I decided to ask others for their opinions. I spoke with my fellow elders and the pastor. We talked for hours and agreed that I should guide her toward making the right choice. Once things calmed down, I would bring both of them in for counseling, where she could explain everything to him. But that didn't happen. I'm not sure if it was because I had been too strict at our first meeting or if her guilt became too much to bear. The old man, looking quite old then, took a deep breath. She told him. And he reacted in a way that surprised everyone. What happened afterward was sad. He drove across town to confront the other man, which led to pain for many people. His voice shook. They were so young, with their whole lives ahead. I had never seen Bob like this. His shoulders slumped as the weight of the situation dragged him down. I wanted to speak up, but he straightened and continued. He didn't look at me at all, even in the reflection of the window. 2 families were hurt, not just because of a bad choice, but also because of the secrets revealed. The pressure on everyone, and my uncertainty led to this. Bob, you can't blame yourself for that. It wasn't... The man who had become like a father to me over the past year struggled to find words. He wasn't crying. I doubted he cried much, except maybe at a funeral, but his voice broke. I do, though. Not for everything, but I played a part. I should have done more. That's why I thought Ella shouldn't tell Lance. But she was still being unfaithful. He nodded sadly. I know. I'm disappointed in her. She feels disappointed in herself, too. I talk with her about it and try to help her find better ways to deal with her stress and fears. I thought the country would recover quickly, just like it did before, but that didn't happen. Ella, she couldn't handle it. He shook his head. But her unfaithfulness isn't the biggest secret anymore. I frowned at what he said. What do you mean? Bob sat down again and took a sip of his beer, returning to his calm, thoughtful self. Now it's not just her secret. It has gone on too long. Now it's our secret, all of ours. If one of us tells him, he'll eventually find out that more of us know. He'll realize we've known for a while. That means it's not just her mistake. It's ours too. Imagine being in his place. Your whole neighborhood knows your wife has been unfaithful. They've kept it a secret for almost a year. It doesn't matter that we had good intentions when this started or that she planned to confess later. All he will see is that betrayal. What will that do to him? He looked down at his hands on the table. I can't be responsible for a young man ruining his life. I can't let him drown in sadness or turn to unhealthy ways to cope. I won't. Bob. Finally, he looked directly at me, his eyes intense. I am begging you, Doug. Don't tell him. You might think you're doing the right thing, and in some ways you would be. I understand that. But it would be like letting someone sink because there's a sign that says, no swimming. It's a correct action that could lead to a bigger mistake. I know I made a mistake. I should have handled this differently. But when I saw them, I thought of that young family from 20 years ago. Don't punish them because I messed up. We sat in silence for a while. Bob kept looking at me, his gaze shifting now and then, as if giving me a chance to think. I turned over everything he said in my mind, searching for some way out of this mess they had created. I couldn't find one. Finally, I said, I'll need to think about it. I won't say anything to him today, I promise. He nodded. This was the best I could offer him. Then he stood up and said, I understand. Like I said, Doug, you're a good man. I hate that you are in this position, but you have to decide. He paused. His mouth opened slightly. Then he shook his head and smiled tiredly. Now it's up to you. Let your conscience guide you. I trust you'll make the right choice. Yes. He smiled, but I could see it was forced as we said our goodbyes. The hidden message was clear. The right choice was his wish, and he wasn't sure I'd choose it. I wasn't sure either. Earlier that day, I had gone from Ella's to Mary's, thinking I could ask for advice on how to tell Lance, whether to tell him myself, give Ella an ultimatum, or find another strategy. I hoped Mary could help me see things differently. By the time Bob finished speaking, everything felt much more complicated. What Ella had done was wrong. Everyone agreed on that. But in the end, everyone also agreed that telling Lance would not be the best choice. Everyone except me, it seemed. Maybe. All I had to do was stay quiet. What was the worst that could happen? Lance would eventually find out, and I would just be another person who didn't say anything. It seemed like this situation was only temporary, even if it felt like it had lasted a long time. Maybe Lance would never find out, and he could go on with his life without knowing that his wife had been with someone else. Not just for a year, but probably for years, given how things were going. If I spoke up, I feared the consequences would be terrible. In my imagination, I couldn't picture Lance ever hurting Ella, but how much would my words hurt him? I knew enough about divorce to understand it would be tough for him, especially since his wife stayed at home. It wouldn't be easy. Would he choose to forgive her to keep his home and his children, particularly during such hard times? If he did forgive, would Ella change? If not, would Lance ignore what was happening, or would he have to face a hard truth? How would all of this affect their kids? I spent the whole night tossing and turning. The next day, I tried to focus on work, but it didn't help. When lunch came, my phone kindly reminded me that it was Wednesday, and it was time for my workout at Ella's house. Thanks for the reminder, but I didn't end up going. I didn't go to her place, and she didn't come to mine. I didn't hear from her at all, and no neighbors stopped by to talk about what was going on. In fact, nobody came over at all for 2 days. Later, I realized everyone was giving me space to figure things out. The group I worried about had sent someone to talk to me, and any more discussions might confuse things. More importantly, it would undermine what Bob had said about making the right choice. Slowly, I began to think that maybe it was the right choice. By Friday, I had thought about everything for long enough that the shock of Ella's actions and everyone else's silence had faded a bit. I started to see the sense in what Bob and Mary had said. Maybe Bob's fears about how Lance would react were exaggerated, but Mary's worries seemed very true. I knew that if I were in Lance's shoes and found out my wife and neighbors had kept something like this from me, I would feel strongly betrayed. More importantly, I had started to slip into a pattern I had grown used to in our neighborhood. When facing a tough choice, I would ask my neighbors for advice and follow it. Their guidance had always helped me before. Why would this be different? Sure, I felt terrible about keeping a secret, but I knew everyone else felt the same way. Bob and Mary had said it was the best option out of many not-so-good ones, and I could understand their point of view. That weekend, I ran into Lance and Ella at a barbecue in the afternoon, one of the few times both could actually be there. People were chatting with the couple, and their kindness towards Lance seemed genuine. No one said anything unkind about him, gossiped behind his back, or looked at him with pity. I kept my distance from him, but I tried to do it in a way that wasn't noticeable. I offered to help out with small tasks like getting drinks or assisting Mrs. Alvarez in the kitchen. While I was busy fetching extra lawn chairs from the garage, Ella came up to me. Her voice surprised me. "Hey!" I turned to her, putting down the chairs I had collected. "Hey!" Her face looked different from the cheerful one I was used to seeing. She looked troubled, and I wondered if I was seeing the real Ella for the first time. "I guess you want to talk about something?" She put a finger to her lips to shush me and closed the garage door. "Yes, no," Ella sighed. "I don't know. It seems like Bob has already talked to you. So has Mary. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I want you to understand." "Understand what?" "He's trying hard, and you're seeing someone else. This is not a new story. I just didn't expect—" I sighed. "Whatever. Tell me why I shouldn't say anything to him." Ella opened her mouth to reply, but then paused, searching for the words. Finally, she said, "Maybe you should. He deserves better, I know that. But it was a mistake. I've ended it. Not just because you found me with him, but for many reasons." She sat down on the edge of George Alvarez's woodworking table. "I can explain what I did, but it doesn't make it right. Still, you asked me to make my case, so you deserve to hear everything, right?" Ella gave a small, sad smile, then looked at the floor. "Maybe you'll find a reason to look past it. I love Lance. I love him and the kids with all my heart. The whole world could fall apart, and I wouldn't care, as long as I had them. But—" She paused, biting her lip. "Things got really tough a couple of years before you moved here. We bought a bigger house, hoping to have another child or two, and the market, well, it was unpredictable." Ella sighed. "Like everyone else, we thought we were getting a good deal. We believed the market would only go up. Lance had just started his company, and it was doing well. We were happy and had 2 lovely kids. Everything seemed perfect. Then business took a downturn. We argued more than ever. It felt intense and not in a good way. We talked about moving to a smaller place, but we owed more on the mortgage than it was worth. He started working longer hours. I tried my best to help with his smaller paycheck. We talked about me getting a job, but when we looked into it, the cost of daycare would take almost all of my earnings. Plus, the added expenses like gas would wipe out whatever was left. So, since I couldn't contribute financially, I aimed to be the best wife I could be. The women in the neighborhood—" She laughed softly. "Well, you've mentioned before that you're their project. I was their project first. They supported each other through tough times like economic downturns and other challenges. The other housewives gave me many ideas to save money while still cooking nicely and dressing well. They taught me—" Ella waved her hand. "You know, just like you learned from them. They were truly good friends, always trying to help. But mostly they made things easier for me so I could make it easier for him. They told me it was important to keep him happy because he was working hard for our family. So, I did just that. While he worked long hours, I took care of the yard, budgeting, and anything else to lighten his load. I tried to be caring and thoughtful, doing everything I could to bring him joy." She looked up at me with a delicate smile. "And it worked. We were happy again, like we used to be before we moved here, before the tough times started." Her lovely face turned serious. "At least for a while." Ella gazed at the ceiling, as if seeking answers for why her life had taken such a turn. "The tough times began to worsen. It really started to affect us. We trimmed our spending to the bare minimum, which only made him more upset. He compared himself to our neighbors, to men who had stable jobs and security. I tried to reassure him, but I think it made him feel even less secure. I went back to what had helped before, wanting to make his life better. I wanted to show him that our situation didn't have to hold us back. I asked Julia to look after the kids so I could go to the gym, the only little treat I allowed myself, and get back in shape. I worked hard at it." Her eyes turned toward me, and a brief charming smile crossed her face before it faded, and she couldn't meet my gaze. "How they all look at me." She took a slow breath in and then let it slip out. "One of the women at the gym suggested I consider personal training. The certification was quick and easy, and I was good at it. It would provide some extra money without needing full-time childcare. I thought it was a smart idea. Lance wasn't too excited, but I showed him how I could make money without many expenses, and he finally agreed." At first, things went well. The extra money made things a bit easier for us. I admit I started to relax a little. It was hard for me, feeling like my family's happiness depended on me. I thought if I was not perfect, everything would fall apart. I didn't realize how heavy that was on me. Well, I finally had my own job again for the first time in years, one I enjoyed, with new friends outside our neighborhood. Men were looking at me more. This shouldn't have meant much because I loved Lance, but it felt nice to get some attention. I remembered seeing Ella with Tony, and I spoke up. Even if you don't want to dance, it's still nice to be asked. Ella looked at me, understanding that I meant more than just her. She nodded slowly. Yeah, I didn't want to hurt my husband, but it felt good to know that other men found me attractive. They may have asked me out, and a few did, but I could say no because I wanted to be a good wife. It feels nice to be noticed, to know you're appreciated, even if you're with someone else. But Tony did ask. She nodded, looking down. Yes, Tony did. He had shown interest before, and he was the first one to talk to me when I became a trainer. I made it clear I loved my husband, and if he wanted anything more than training, he should look elsewhere. But Tony didn't do that, and even though he kept looking. Well, I liked that. I shouldn't have, but I did. Her expression turned serious. I lost sight of why I started doing all this and who I was doing it for. Maybe I just chose to forget. Lance and I began to argue again. I thought it was just jealousy because I had built something for myself that didn't depend on him. Honestly, I still think that was part of it. He enjoyed having a super wife for a while, and just being a regular wife wasn't enough for him anymore. We fought one day before he left on a trip. Normally we would. She chuckled softly. Well, I tried to keep him happy, so we usually had fun making up. But this time we didn't, and we hadn't been close the whole week before that because he was so tired. By then he was really out of shape. Not that it bothered me. I would love him no matter what, but it meant he was too wiped out after long days at work, while my job gave me energy, so I was always... Ready for affection? I suggested lightly, and she laughed, her cheeks turning red. A thought of her blushing crossed my mind, and I quickly pushed it away. With a playful snort, she said, Yes. It's funny that most of the women in our neighborhood would be shocked if I told them I was ready for affection around them. I'm really glad I can talk to you like this. I hope we still can be friends after all this. I nodded but didn't say anything yet, and she carried on with her story. Anyway, we argued about something small the night before he left on a trip, and we hadn't felt close for a week, even though I was ready to connect each night. The next morning, he didn't say he loved me before he went. He hardly spoke to me at all. It felt like he didn't care. I was really mad and frustrated with him, and then Tony took a chance. I wasn't sure if he had been waiting for the right time or what. She sighed. It wasn't the best situation. It rarely was with him. It was always okay, but not great. Not like with Lance. I felt angry and upset, and after it all, I just wanted to give up. Yet, I also felt more relaxed than I had in months. Knowing I could never be perfect made it easier to stop trying. I wasn't the ideal partner. I couldn't be. How could an ideal partner go against their spouse? When Lance came back, I put all my effort into making him happy. I was glad I took precautions, so at least I didn't worry about anything. I focused on showing Lance he was appreciated and loved, waking him up with small gestures each morning, giving him... She blushed a little. I gave him something he had always wanted but hadn't asked for since we started dating. The thought of closeness made my heart race. I imagined her showing affection in a way that excited me, and I felt a bit uneasy. The real Ella was watching me, and I knew she could see the effect she had on me, whether she meant to or not. Ella looked away for a moment before continuing. Anyway, I devoted myself to Lance and our family. I acted like the perfect partner, but without the need to actually be perfect, you know? I couldn't be flawless, but I could pretend, and I did, because Lance deserved the best partner, especially after what happened. And about a month later, when I felt unloved, unappreciated, Lance got frustrated, and sometimes he took it out on me instead of the situation. That upset me, but I didn't fight back. I didn't want to make things harder for us. It was easy to accept my imperfections during those times. I allowed myself to be imperfect, letting distractions from someone I didn't care about take me away from the stress of our lives. Those brief escapes, mixed with the guilt of feeling like I wasn't a good partner, gave me strength to be the partner Lance needed when it really mattered. "That's not how it should be," I said. Ella shrugged. "It's not how it should be, but that's how it has been. 2 years ago, Lance and I were almost done. Now my husband is happier than he's ever been. We have a loving relationship, filled with moments of connection. I'm the mother to his children, a supportive partner in public, and I work hard to keep our home running well. He gets a lot of love and appreciation from me. And I really do care for him. I know that, despite his flaws, I'm lucky to have him. He's lucky to have me too, though. Just ask any man in this neighborhood if they'd want to switch places with him. Some might think about it, some might say no, but they'd all at least consider it. Look at me." She stood tall and pointed to herself. "I take care of myself and look good for him. I'm always here when he wants to connect, and I often make the first move. I do all I can to manage our home. I'm what many people want, and they all see it. I will do anything for my husband and family, even if it means putting aside my own feelings and happiness. Because let's be honest, the only joy I really get from this is watching them happy." Ella sighed. "I'm not going to get that anymore after what Tony did. Mary told me what you saw, but even before I talked to her, I told him to leave. He threatened to tell Lance, but I'll tell his wife. And I was very upset when I learned he was married after we had already met up several times, and he can't let that happen." She shrugged and added, "It doesn't matter anyway. Things have settled down with Lance's business. He has plenty of clients now and is cutting back on his hours to spend more time with us. I can reduce my personal training clients to just the ones I want to keep working with, so I won't feel too pressured anymore, and neither will Lance. We can just be the happy couple with happy kids, and the only lasting hurt I have is the guilt I'm feeling. If—" She looked at me. "Well, if you can just help us keep this quiet. Do you think Lance would feel the same way if he knew?" Ella shrugged again. "I know he wouldn't, but he doesn't have to know. That's the point. The whole neighborhood has kept my secret for a year. No mistakes, no gossip, nothing. If you hadn't walked in on Tony and me, you wouldn't even know. The woman I had admired since we met came closer to me. She didn't do it in a flirty way. When she put her hand on my arm, it was a gentle touch. She acted like a friend asking for help, not someone trying to twist things in her favor. That didn't change how I felt. It still made my heart race. If she had asked me for anything in that moment, I might have thought about it. I believed her when she said any of the men who knew her secret would want to be in her husband's place. I would have, too, especially as the voice in my mind told me I could have done better. I could have stopped her from feeling so upset. Her lips opened, and words came out softly. "Please, Doug, don't tell him. I know you want to do the right thing, but telling him isn't right. I care about Lance. I care about our family. Keep this secret, and I promise I will spend my life making him happy. What I've done hasn't hurt him yet. Whether he gets hurt is up to you now. Please don't do this to him." Then she smiled sadly and pulled back to look at me. With a small laugh, she wiped away a mark she had left. "We don't want people talking, right?" I laughed too, even if I didn't mean to. "No, I guess not." She seemed ready to say more, but changed her mind, instead picking up some chairs I had come for. "Can you get the door? I'll help you carry them." Lance didn't seem to notice she was gone, or if he did, it wasn't a big deal to him. Ella returned to his side, putting her arm around him and barely looking back at me. I watched them for the rest of the party, trying to be subtle. I noticed all of them, Lance, Ella, and their kids. I saw a man who loved his family and was happy with his life. He played with Hunter and Zoe, shared sweet moments with Ella when he thought no one was watching, and laughed with the other dads. If I didn't know better, I'd say he had the exact life I wanted in 10 years. But I did know better. Ella knew that too, and occasionally she would look at me with a gentle, worried smile that seemed to say, "Please don't change this. Don't ruin his happiness, our happiness." Bob walked over to me with 2 beers in the late afternoon, handing me one. We talked mostly about my business and how well it was doing. He and the others had helped me find many new clients, and I was even thinking about having someone else help with the work. After a pause, he nodded towards Lance and said, "I hear his is going well, too. Sounds like he's doing much better. It's nice to see him back with his family." It was just a gentle hint toward the happy ending he, Ella, Mary, and everyone else wanted to see. He had said enough and knew it. Instead of pushing the point, he held up his empty bottle. "Do you want another?" I shook my head. "No, I think I'll head home. I need to catch up on work while it's busy." Trying to shift away from the subject we were avoiding, I added in my worst cowboy voice, "A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do." Bob chuckled at my poor impression, then grew serious. "Make sure you take time to enjoy your successes, son. It's very easy to forget why we work so hard." Looking back at Lance, he added, "He did for a bit, but now he's back where he belongs, part of our big, happy family." Then, shaking off the serious mood, he smiled, patted me on the shoulder, and said, "Get a plate before you go. Julia and George will have leftovers for days." College wasn't so far behind that I would turn down free food, so I followed his advice. Ella gave me a small, hopeful wave as I walked towards the door with my overflowing plate, and after a moment, I waved back. She tilted her head to one side as if to ask, "So?" After a few seconds, I nodded a few times with a resigned look. I would keep her secret. Excitedly, she mouthed, "Really?" I nodded again and mouthed back, "Yes." The relieved smile on her face made my heart ache, not just because she was beautiful, but because I felt like I had given a part of myself to earn that smile. It wasn't her fear or hope that influenced my decision, nor Bob's or Mary's words, although they mattered. It was Lance himself. I had never seen him so relaxed. He always seemed happy with Ella and the kids, but that day, I saw a new side of him, one free from the weight that had held him down for so long. I realized then that it wasn't that the people in the neighborhood weren't his friends. It was that he'd always been too stressed to relax. At the barbecue, Lance acted just like everyone else, chatting with the other dads, enjoying drinks and laughter, and taking his turn at the grill. He looked completely happy. Whatever he and Ella had done to work through their challenges, they had made it together, and he deserved to be joyful. If Bob was right, and Lance's business had finally improved enough for him to be home more often, and if Ella was telling the truth about her actions, especially after seeing her with the other man, then I could also accept the messy truth if it meant keeping their family together and happy. I would be Lance's friend, even though I knew he would likely be hurt if he ever found out what I had done for that friendship. What we all had done. That night, I fell asleep easily. My mind wasn't totally clear. I don't think it ever could be, no matter what choice I made. But I had decided, and I came to terms with what it meant for my own sense of myself as a person, as a man, and as a friend. Ella filled my dreams. In them, I was the man who comforted her through difficult times. I was the one who cared for her deeply. I dreamed that she found comfort in me like no one else. Dark, shadowy shapes moved around in the dream of her bedroom. Some stood back, watching without much interest, while others paid close attention to the bond we shared, making the moment feel almost electric. When I woke up, I found myself alone in my bed, and I felt a hollow ache inside. I tried to shake it off at first with sheer will, then by keeping busy. I mowed the lawn, edged the garden, and tackled every other chore I could think of. I wanted to believe this worked, but the dreams returned the next night, along with that same empty feeling in the morning. The work I did on Monday morning helped me forget the uneasy emptiness. When my phone alarm went off, reminding me to prepare for my workout with Ella, that familiar feeling returned even stronger. I told myself I was doing the right thing, or at least the better choice, since those I trusted seemed to think so. Doing what's right is tough, I reminded myself. That's all this is. Just push through. Do it for them. I waved at Ella when I spotted her on the street and offered a quick hello before using work as an excuse to leave before things got too serious. I knew I could only use this trick for so long, but by Friday, the troubling dreams had stopped visiting me at night. Hopefully, the empty feeling would go away soon, too. Leading up to my decision, my neighbors mostly kept their distance. However, after the barbecue, they returned with renewed energy, often bringing gifts. The neighborhood ladies were known for sharing extra treats, but this week their offerings seemed far more plentiful, as if for a large celebration. Their husbands also got involved, bringing along a mix of gifts. On the simpler side, Troy Jeffries dropped off some leftover bags of fertilizer from his yard work. Meanwhile, Sam Henderson handed me a new gaming console he had planned for his son, feeling frustrated that he couldn't give it to him due to issues with his ex-wife. This opened up a chance for me to ask why he kept his past experiences to himself. He told me he had faced a similar situation before, but his short affair left him feeling guilty. Months later, someone told his wife about it, and it led to their family's breakdown. He didn't want to see anyone else go through that. While I didn't ask every neighbor about their reasons, I picked up enough to understand that many had their own stories. Some were frustrated that events had dragged on, much like Bob felt. Most, though, seemed resigned to Ella's choices. And besides, they all said one way or another, it's done now, right? She's not involved with that guy anymore, especially with Lance's lighter workload now. I also skipped my Wednesday workouts. My phone alarm stayed quiet. I had turned it off. My inner voice reminded me, hey, it's time to get up, have a snack, and then work out with your neighbor. Yet I still struggled to do it, still. Even if I pushed my dreams of her aside, I couldn't picture stepping into her living room without thinking about the surprising moment I had seen earlier. In the end, it didn't really matter. At 1 p.m. sharp, my doorbell rang, and there stood Ella Jenkins, wearing her usual workout clothes and looking good, even with a playful frown on her face. Are you going to keep avoiding me? I can't let you get out of shape, you know. Ella, she smiled gently. I understand, Doug. I really do. It's awkward, especially since... Sighing, she added, can I come in? I don't want to do this outside. I stepped back to let her in, then closed the door and followed her to the living room. Our friendship from the past year meant she was always welcome here, and she felt at home. But I was a little taken aback by how casually she walked in and sat on my couch. Things had shifted between us, hadn't they? How could she act so comfortably when everything felt different? Ella noticed the frown starting on my face. Doug, if you don't want to be friends anymore, I understand. It hurts, but I get it. I don't want that, though. Other than losing Lance, this is the second worst thing I can think of. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled it away. I could see the hurt on her face and hear it in her voice. Please don't. I'm still me, Doug. I know I'm not perfect. I think maybe you didn't want to see that before. I know you've cared about me and I appreciate it. But I thought we had a real bond beyond that. I thought so too, until I found out. I shook my head. I didn't keep it from you because I didn't trust you, Doug. I just feared that too many people already knew, and I worried that someone might tell Lance. But also, because I wanted someone in my life to see me beyond my mistakes. I hoped for someone who wouldn't define me by that part of my life. I never wanted to be seen as perfect by Lance or anyone else, but I allowed that to happen because of what others said. When I met you, I was so relieved. Even with all the feelings, you treated me like a person, and that felt really nice. I didn't have to be the perfect partner or worry about what everyone else thought. With you, I'm just simply Ella, your friend. She laughed softly. Maybe sometimes. Ella, an important friend too, but you seemed to hold back your enthusiasm around me after a while, which I took as a compliment. Ella paused for a moment and then said quietly, I'd really like to get back to that with you. If I can't, okay, I get it, even if I don't like it. But if I can't, I need to stop being seen in a bad light because otherwise this won't work. Lance will notice something strange is happening. Yeah, I guess so. Okay. She took a deep breath and let it out. What I need you to do is wear your workout clothes and come to my house. We can act as if everything is normal, right? We'll get back on track and maybe... No. She looked at me, confused. What? No, I can't. I sighed. Maybe later. But when I think about working out at your place, I just feel uncomfortable. If I go over there and see you working hard, well, it just won't help. If we want to feel normal again, we need to do things a bit differently, even if that's strange. Ella slowly nodded, understanding. Okay. What if we work out here? It's true that you don't have all the equipment, but we could use our own body weight. Well, I can't change too much, but I also won't mind if things get awkward. How does that sound? I guess we can try that. So we tried it, and her being there did affect me, although she didn't mention it. Awkward doesn't really capture how those first few workouts felt. By the 4th session, my focus changed, and by the 5th, we were joking and laughing during the breaks. I won't say I forgot, but I did move on. After a month, we were back to socializing. The feeling between us was different, like something was buzzing quietly. But she didn't say anything about it, and neither did I. I thought others in the neighborhood might notice, but Lance didn't seem to, even when he was around. 3 months later, when he was around became almost never. As any small business owner learns, being successful often means working harder. Could Lance have said no to some of it? Maybe. Ella thought so. I didn't want to speak against him, but those long hours seemed too much, especially since he had Ella and their kids at home. I understand now. There's always another bill to pay. More importantly, after going through a tough time like they did, a deep fear can settle in, a worry that another problem is just around the corner. There was one, just not the kind he thought. Ella was getting more frustrated with her husband. I knew from our talks about what had happened that she often felt this way but tried to hide it from him. Without the way she used to express herself, she found it harder to hide her feelings and sometimes showed her anger even to her husband. This new Ella, or rather the older version of her I had not seen before, didn't share her frustrations when we were together, but it was clear she felt upset. Underneath her worries, I occasionally noticed a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Maybe it was always there, or perhaps I had only known Ella after her life changed. When that spark appeared, she reminded me of a restless person wanting something different, waiting for a chance. I wish I could say I saw what was coming. Truthfully, I might have missed the signs. Besides the tension between us, which I thought was because of our new secret, and the longing I sometimes spotted in her look, everything seemed to have returned to normal in our time together. But it hadn't, even if I didn't see it. Our lives became more connected as Lance's work kept him away from home more often. Hunter, now 6 and in kindergarten, often had Zoe with him when Ella chose to spend time with Uncle Doug, and I ended up in their home a lot. I sometimes cooked dinner for their family when Lance was away. The women in the neighborhood had taught me cooking, and it became a real hobby for me, which was nice for the Jenkins family. The spot in Ella's living room that once held special memories lost some of its meaning over time, though we still exercised at my house. Doing bodyweight workouts was a nice change for her, and coming to my place gave her another reason to get out. Little Zoe sometimes joined us, which inspired Ella to think about starting a Yoga for Kids program. With my job, community activities, and Ella playing a bigger role in my life, I barely noticed how the visits from young, single women to my home slowed down. They changed from frequent to rare, and then I had many days alone. Every weekend I thought about going out again, but new obligations kept coming up, pushing those plans aside. Besides, I had company, though it wasn't romantic, and I figured there would be time to go out later when things calmed down a bit. Right? 5 months after my discovery, Ella knocked on my door. She arrived early for our Wednesday workout, but that was not unusual. We often chatted while I prepared snacks or a light lunch for her, Zoe, and myself. Today, though, Zoe wasn't with her, and Ella seemed different. After a quick hello, she stepped inside, glancing back as she did. "Elle, is everything okay?" She shook her head, looking worried. "No, it's not." After taking off her coat, she added, "Nothing is okay. Lance and we had another fight." She looked thoughtful, a hint of the past showing in her eyes. "It feels like a long time ago. I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do to help? That's why I got here early. I really need to ask you for a big favor." She leaned in, urgency in her gaze. "You're the only one I can trust with this." I pulled back slightly. "Why don't you relax in the living room while I grab us some drinks? You look like you could use one." Ella nodded, a small frown on her lips. Yeah, I probably do. A few minutes later, with drinks ready, I asked, "Where's Zoe?" "She's with Julia. I told her." She took a sip of her drink and smiled. "Thanks, this is really good. Anyway, I told her I needed to talk to you. She's been a huge help, you know." "Yeah, she's wonderful." I sat down on the couch, maintaining a comfortable distance. "So what did you want to talk about?" "You know you can ask me anything, Ella." She hesitated, biting her lip. "I know. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I talked to some of the other ladies, and they think this could be the best choice. That you can help me." Her hands moved, fidgeting, showing her nerves. "Hey, it's all right. Just tell me." Ella closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and opened them again. There was determination in her gaze. "I need support again. What I had with Tony, but differently. Lance and I are arguing, and I nearly lost it this morning. I need to feel better, to cope with all the stress, and I want your help." Before I could respond, she continued, "Please don't say no. This makes sense. You care for me and for Lance. I believe you might even care about me as more than just friends. I'm not saying it has to be romantic, but as a friend. I appreciate you in that way, too. Not like I feel for Lance, but if things—" She shook her head. "No, this isn't about what-ifs. It's about what's happening now and what I need. You want what's best for me and my family? You've carried a big weight for months, even though it's been hard for you. I've always counted on you, and these last few months, I've relied on you more than ever. I know you care about me, Doug. I care about you too, and I have for a long time. Even before you knew what I'd been through, I thought about asking for your help. I wanted to be with someone I genuinely liked, not just for physical reasons, but as a true friend." Ella moved a little closer. I caught a hint of her floral shampoo. "I know it's a lot to ask, another secret, but I promise I'll make it up to you. When I need support, I'll do everything I can to help you in return. You can be nice to me, or we can keep it light and easy. However you want to handle this, I hope you can help me feel better." I nodded to her with a smile. "What if I actually want to spend time with you, even when you don't need help? I might need a break, too. Work keeps me busy, and it's hard to find someone to connect with. Having you around would be nice." She paused for a moment. "I hadn't thought of that, but yes, what I need is a big request, as I mentioned. So I can be there for you, too." I laughed a bit and asked, "Would that be such a hassle?" Ella moved a little closer and said, "No, I guess not. I didn't mean it that way. If you had asked before when I was with Tony, I might have thought about it. It would have made things simpler. I just didn't think you'd be interested." Her hand rested gently on my knee. "But you've always shown interest, haven't you?" "Yeah, since we first met. How about you? Honestly?" "Always?" She smiled. "No, not always. But for a long time, yes. I've noticed how you look at me, and it really means a lot. I'll tell you a little secret. During the last several months with Tony, I wished he was you." I tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You mentioned talking to some of our neighbors? Who?" "Oh, Julia, Mary, and a few others. Everyone knows what a good friend you've been to me, and they appreciate that you kept my secret. They trust you to keep this one, too." Ella laughed again. "Like you said, if you're available." With a nervous nod, I said, "Yeah, but what about the others? The ones you didn't talk to?" She sighed. "They'll come around. I spoke with Kathy, and while Bob might be upset, she thinks she can help him understand our side." "Better the devil you know?" Ella bit her lip and smiled softly. "Yeah, the devil I know. Maybe not completely yet, but I want to change that." Ella leaned in a bit closer, her expression warm, and I didn't pull away. The connection felt strong as she took my hand, pulling it closer, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Pulling my hand back, I gasped. "What about Lance?" Ella whispered back with passion. "Lance won't know. He doesn't need to. I'll love him like I always have. I'll care for you too, just in a different way, but I'll give you more than you expect." "Will you let me know if things change? What if I want to be with you?" She nodded eagerly, and I could see her determination wavering under the weight of our conversation. Ella had made choices before that tested her commitments, and our neighbors had kept their secrets. I was sure they would remain silent again, and her husband would be none the wiser. It felt like a door had opened, one I could go through many times if I wanted. But I paused. Caught between feelings of wish and annoyance, I asked, "What if I get married? Will you still be here for me then?" Her eyes grew wide. "Oh, yes." I pulled my hand back. "And if things get tough and I'm too busy to be with my family, would you support my partner like you hope I would support you?" "What do you mean?" I continued. "Will you help her find happiness, like our neighbors helped you? Will you be there for her? Maybe even help her find someone to fill in where I can't?" Ella looked at me, her voice a mix of doubt and sadness. "Doug, I would never do that. You're my friend. I would never hurt you. Like Lance is everyone's friend, like they wouldn't turn against him." "Doug," I shook my head, feeling torn. "I kept your secret before because it felt right. But this, I can't be part of it anymore." There was a strong mix of fear and resistance in her voice. "What does that mean?" I sighed, feeling worn out. "You need to tell him. About the past. About everything we've kept hidden. Stop hiding it from him and stop dragging me in." "I can't tell him." I looked into Ella's eyes, noticing the tears coming. "You will, or I will." She gasped, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. I softened my voice. "Tell him, Ella. What you're doing, what you suggested isn't true love, no matter how you try to convince yourself." She shook her head. "I can't." I stood and gently pulled her to her feet. She tried to lean into me, but I couldn't let her stay that way. I guided her to the door and placed her coat over her shoulders, giving us a moment of quiet understanding. Wiping her eyes with a tissue, I said softly, "If you truly care about him, you need to do this. Tell him. Find a way forward if you can. But you have to tell him, or I will. I can give you until Sunday night, but if you haven't said anything by then..." Ella looked at me, first in shock, then in anger. I opened the door and gestured for her to leave, her face twisted with frustration, but I quietly said, "Please go," and the words stuck in her throat. My friend turned and left my home. I didn't achieve anything that day, nor did I rest well that night. The next day was better, but by Saturday evening I realized I hadn't had any visitors, and I began to worry. I had expected someone to come and talk me out of revealing Ella's secret and the community's part in it. That didn't happen. No one showed up to discuss this or anything else. I thought about reaching out to someone, but chose to keep my thoughts to myself for once. The longer I sat with my decision, the more sure I became that it was the right one. It took me longer than it should have, but I finally reached this conclusion. Months earlier, Bob had told me to make the right choice, and I finally felt that I had. I understood why others had gone down the wrong path, led by their fear, but I knew I couldn't let fear control me anymore. On Sunday evening, as I walked up to Ella and Lance's front door, I felt both anxious and determined, ready to face whatever happened next. Maybe they would appreciate what I did, or maybe they wouldn't, but I knew I had to take this step. Lance answered the door when I knocked, and I felt a rush of relief. Ella might have tried to stop this conversation, but now we could talk honestly. "Lance!" Before I could finish, I didn't see the first blow coming, and I was too surprised to avoid the second. "What are you doing?" I managed to ask, but my ears were ringing and it was hard to think clearly. I hadn't been in a fight since I was a kid, and that didn't end well for me back then. Lance was heavier and already breathing hard, but he still had a good height on me, and his anger was fueling him. I avoided his next punch as he said, "You were our friend. She came to you for support and you hurt her? What's wrong with you?" He tried to swing wildly again, but it was clear he hadn't fought in years either, and I stepped back to dodge him. "That's not what I—" "Doug!" Bob's deep voice caught my attention. I looked past Lance and saw him, Kathy, and Ella on the porch. Ella reached for her husband, trying to stop him, but Bob and Kathy watched with disappointment. "Go on home, son. You aren't welcome here." You aren't welcome here. In that moment, I understood that here didn't just mean at the Jenkins house or on their porch. Here meant the whole neighborhood. It meant the community. I looked around and saw our neighbors peeking through their windows, watching the scene unfold. More faces appeared across the street, waiting to see what would happen, knowing I was already at a disadvantage. Not long ago I had been their project, but now I felt like their problem. Bob and Kathy being at the Jenkins house, supporting whatever Ella said, meant this wasn't just a small fight. It had become a show, with me as the unfortunate person in the spotlight, as the community observed with concern. Lance's next blow hit me hard on the side of my head, catching me off guard as I realized my situation. I fell to the ground, my head spinning. Ella got to Lance and grabbed his arm before he could step closer, trying to calm him down. I felt sick, from both the pain in my head and the feeling of betrayal in my heart. I almost found it funny, realizing I had been the one to betray Lance all along. I pushed myself up from the ground, struggling to stand. My stomach churned, but I managed to get up, just barely. "I'm not your son, Bob." Lance turned back to face me, ready for another round, but he paused when he saw me holding something towards him. In the dim light, before the street lamps lit up, he might have had trouble seeing it clearly. Ella recognized the object first. A look of shock crossed her face as she realized what it meant, gasping, "Don't!" just like a voice from days before coming from the speaker. "I know you want me, Doug. I want you too, and I have for a long time. Even before you knew what I had done, I thought about asking you for help. I wanted to be with someone I actually liked, someone I wanted in a real way. Someone who could be a true friend instead of just a casual date." Lance's wife screamed, rushing forward to grab my phone. I was taller than her, so I held it out of her reach, keeping her at bay with my other arm as she struggled. "I understand this is a lot to ask, another secret to keep, but I promise I'll make it up to you. When I need comfort, I'll do almost anything you ask. You can make me feel valued, or treat me kindly, or just keep me company. Whatever you need from me, as long as you can help me feel better." Smartphones had been around for a while, but many people didn't think about how they affected privacy, especially if they were older. Ella didn't know that when I went to get drinks, I had turned on the recorder, then set it on the table next to my drink when I returned from the kitchen. Current Ella shouted in her mind, trying to drown out the past, but the harm had already been done. Lance's voice shook with the hurt one might expect from a betrayed partner, while Ella kept reaching for my arm, fighting to regain control after her secrets came out. Tears streamed down Lance's face as the device revealed his wife's lies. Kathy eventually walked over to Ella, who was now lost in painful cries. Mrs. Grayson glared at me, pulled her younger friend close, and hugged her, trying to comfort her, saying everything would be all right. But it wasn't. I planned to make sure it stayed that way. The drifter wanted payback for what the dishonest townspeople had done to Marshall Duncan. I swiped my thumb across the screen, looking for the part that would expose at least one of them. "You said you spoke to some of the neighbors?" "Who?" "Oh, Julia, Mary, a few others. They know how good a friend you've been to me, and they appreciate that you kept my secret. Our secret. All of ours. They trust you to keep this one too. Just like you said, if you can count on me." "Yeah, but what about the others? The ones you didn't talk to?" "They'll come around. I spoke with Kathy, and even though Bob will be upset, she believes she can help him see our point of view." Kathy stood stiff next to me. Bob's face turned angry, something I hadn't seen before. "You knew? You knew she was going to do this?" His wife tried to comfort him. "Bob, please." Bob opened his mouth as if to shout, but then closed it tight. He pushed his way past Lance and the two women who were now crying. He looked at me for a moment, his expression softening, but he said nothing. What could he say? What words could fix this? The tears in his eyes showed everything as he stepped around me and left the yard. I took a step closer to Lance, still cautious of the anger he had shown earlier. The spirit that once filled him seemed to have vanished, leaving behind a shadow of who he was. "Lance!" He shook his head, and I stopped. No apology could change what had happened, even if I had eventually opened his eyes. I was not a hero. I had chosen what was easy over what was right, just like everyone else in town, even if I believed otherwise. Trying to do the right thing now meant I had ignored the wrong for too long. After I sent him the recording, I left without another word. The lights in the houses next to us had gone dark, and as I walked back home, I noticed the silhouettes in the windows across the street had vanished too. The confrontation was over. Nobody had won. Change came, as it often does, in both quick and slow ways in the weeks that followed. Most immediately, my neighbors became just people living in the houses nearby. Eventually, they faded further from that. Just days after the confrontation, the Kings Forest HOA began sending me citation after citation for small issues that had never been a problem before. I thought about fighting them, but then wondered, why bother? I had gone from project to problem to outcast. Why fight to stay in a place where I had no friends and memories I wanted to forget? My business suffered too. A lot of my clients had been neighbors, and that support vanished. Some referrals still came in, but I lost a few of those as well. I had bought my house as both a home and an investment, and I decided that I would rather focus my efforts on rebuilding my business. Lance and Ella didn't make it. That wasn't surprising. He moved out within a few days, leaving behind 2 children who didn't understand why their dad wasn't coming home, and a mother who was struggling. The women in the neighborhood, except for Kathy Grayson, came together to support her. They organized meals and helped take care of the children while she tried to regain her balance. Sometimes I spotted Zoe on the street before I left, and she would call out, "Uncle Doug!" Seeing her and Hunter in pain and not being able to help saddened me deeply. I saw Lance one last time. He had parked a rented van in front of his house, similar to the one I had used when I first came to the neighborhood. It was midday, and the kids were at school or with Mrs. Alvarez. Ella was out, likely handling her own feelings about everything. I approached Lance as he took a break between trips back to his house, hoping to offer my help. However, before I could say much, he spoke. "Please leave me alone." "Lance." He stepped closer, and I instinctively pulled back, remembering our last meeting. His eyes showed his anger. "Just go away, Doug. You changed everything for me. I was happy before. You didn't have to say anything about what Ella did. Now look at the mess. You could have helped her find support instead." His tone softened slightly. "She's taking the kids, the house, and part of my business. I might only see my son and daughter a few times a month if I'm lucky, and that's if I can find a place for them to visit me." He sighed. "Just, please go, Doug. Leave me alone." With a heavy heart, I nodded and stepped back, feeling defeated as I walked away. In the years after my time in Kings Forest, I focused heavily on my work. I moved to a nearby town and grew my business through marketing and advertising, not relying on casual referrals anymore. While I still welcomed those opportunities, I promised myself not to depend on connections that might let me down. I made new friends based on shared interests rather than just being nearby. When I finally settled into my own place again, I kept my neighbors somewhat distant. I was friendly but not too invested in those relationships unless I felt it was worth the effort. After a few tries, I re-entered the dating world and even fell in love twice. The first relationship ended when she had to leave for a job, and the second ended in divorce. I can't say for sure if my past with Ella and Lance affected my partner choices, but I think it had an impact. I often thought about that after filing for divorce. Caitlin worked in advertising, and our paths crossed frequently before we started dating, usually when her firm needed an app or a website. We connected right away, but it took time before we met outside of work. When we finally did, the attraction was clear. After a couple of years, we got married. When I stood by Caitlin at the altar, I truly meant every word of my vows. It became clear later that she and I had very different views on our commitment, or maybe she thought I wouldn't find out. It almost worked, at least until one of her co-workers informed me. The affair lasted only 2 months, but it was enough to end our marriage and disrupt our 2 kids' lives, especially after I confronted her and she tried to explain. Cheating was bad enough, but lying about it after I had proof? That was too much. The divorce could have been complicated, and it was in some ways, but I made careful choices after what happened with Lance and Ella. I had a strong prenup in place, so my business was protected. Her alimony would be low since she earned a bit less than I did, but the prenup's infidelity clause took care of that. However, the prenup didn't deal with our kids and our house. Since we shared parenting before the divorce, custody was left to the judge. The judge believed in traditional roles. Mom gets primary custody unless there's a problem, and Dad gets visitation if he's responsible. That's how it seemed to me. The house went with the kids. I would get most of the money when we sold it when they turned 18, which still honored the prenup, but until then, they would keep living there, so she would stay as well. I tried to remind myself that I was better off than many fathers in a divorce. I wasn't in a small place and had kept my business. Still, being away from my kids hurt deeply. Before we settled, Caitlin had been careful to let me see them. She said she wanted to be a good co-parent, even if she had been hard to live with, which I thought was surprisingly mature. But once the divorce was final, my ex-wife was strict about the visitation plan for the kids' good. Not because she was upset about anything. No, it was all about providing them with stability, according to whatever rules she was following. Right. The first week without seeing them was very hard. Yes, I hadn't tucked them in for a while, and I had tried to adjust to the idea that this was our new reality. But after a few days, it hit me. My kids would grow up without me. I would be at best a part-time dad, and at worst, Daddy Doug once Caitlin remarried, and the kids spent most of their time with their new stepfather. Just thinking about that made me feel awful. That troubling feeling is what brought me back to the town where I bought my first house, waiting for the ex-husband of the woman who had first visited me there, the person whose life I had changed. I thought I knew how much pain I caused him back then, but I went ahead with it anyway, believing I was right. Now that I had felt just a bit of what I put him through, I couldn't shake the thought that I needed to apologize again for what I'd done. After waiting that first hour in front of his building, I questioned if I had made a mistake by not going inside. I didn't want security to turn me away, so I decided to wait until lunch and approach him then. He might still ask me to leave, but I hoped to see him and how well he had recovered from the trouble I caused. When Lance finally came out of the building, I barely recognized him. He wore a nice suit, and though he had aged, just like I had, he looked good. He had grown a well-kept beard, and his hair was mostly gray now. What surprised me the most was how fit he looked, unlike when I had known him before. In fact, if he hadn't recognized me first, I'm not sure I would have noticed him at all. Lance spotted me, and I watched as he tried to remember who I was. Recognition slowly appeared on his face, followed by uncertainty as he walked toward me. Doug? Doug Richards? Hey, Lance. I felt foolish for not knowing what to say next. He smiled widely and reached out for a handshake. Oh my God, it's great to see you, man. I took his hand, feeling a bit lost. Wait. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then opened them, looking serious. Doug, I am really sorry for how I treated you last time. The last few times, actually. I should have looked for you, but I didn't have the courage. Will you accept my apology? What? Lance looked at me earnestly. For raising my voice at you? I really am sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I was upset about not knowing sooner, but I still shouldn't have acted like that. He sighed. I have no excuse. It was wrong, and I am sorry. Sure, Lance. I accept your apology. His face brightened. Thank you. I mean it. Thank you. This has been on my mind for years. You were the only one in the neighborhood who did the right thing and... Finally, I said, I changed your life. What? No, you didn't. I know I said that, but I did. Oh. My shoulders drooped. I came here to apologize to you, Lance, for everything, for what happened, and for not being honest with you, too, for taking you away from your kids and your happy life. The weight of my actions hit me as I thought about my own children. I didn't understand back then what that really meant. Lance, I am so sorry. Whatever you said or did to me then, he placed his hand on my shoulder. He was angry and took it out on the wrong person because he needed someone to blame. Doug, I was misplacing my anger. You saved my life, not ruined it. He looked at me again, starting to understand. We haven't been very close, but it feels like you're going through some tough times, right? I nodded. Yeah, I am. Got it. He took out his phone and checked it. What are you doing for lunch? What about the rest of the day? The man whose life I had not ruined took me to a nice Italian restaurant where everyone seemed to know him. We got a quiet table in the corner. Over the next hour, as we ate, I shared everything that had happened to me since we last met, including the night before when I decided to make things right. He listened patiently, asking questions now and then, and only paused a couple of times to respond to texts. When I finished, Lance sighed. I can understand why you would feel overwhelmed. He shook his head. Right now, it might seem like things will never get better. You have problems with your ex-wife, and it feels like she could keep you from your kids or bring someone else into their lives. Maybe that could happen, but it doesn't have to. He leaned back in his chair and sipped his iced tea. I'm not saying our situations are the same, but when things ended with my wife... My brows furrowed. Sorry, I meant Ella. I'll explain later. When that happened, I felt how you described, but it was worse. She tried to hold me in the marriage by threatening my business. We didn't have a prenup. She didn't actively keep the kids from me, but she didn't make it easy for me to see them. I had no friends, was living out of a suitcase, and trying to support 2 homes on a salary that barely supported one. It was a tough time. But here's the important part. I found my way back. You will too. It may feel like your life is destroyed now, but it isn't. I'll help you just like you helped me back then. You keep mentioning your wife. What's her name? He laughed lightly. Yeah, that took me time to get used to. You shared yours, so I'll share mine. When everything happened? Has it really been 12 years? Anyway, things fell apart for a while. I admit that. All the things I mentioned and worse. My wife and I argued, and the kids suffered because of it. What eventually helped us was that we loved our kids more than we disliked each other. That gave us a place to start. I had quickly ruled out going to marriage counseling. There was no way I would ever get back with her after everything that happened. But an old college friend suggested we try family counseling instead. It's a bit different. It focuses more on the family as a whole rather than just the marriage. The goal is to work through our differences for the sake of the kids. Still, we needed to admit to our mistakes. I scoffed. Really? She made a big mistake. He raised his hand to hold back my words. I understand, really. The blame for our divorce mostly falls on her. She would agree with me if she were here, but... Lance looked thoughtful. I think we both got caught up in trying to keep up with others. For me, I wanted to show I could handle the responsibilities we took on. I pushed for us to buy that bigger house because I thought our finances would never stop getting better. When things changed, I saw other people, other men, doing well even during tough times. It hurt my pride when Nora had to ask our neighbors for help, and it made me feel not so good about myself that she seemed to manage it all with ease. This was before she made her mistake. They turned her into what she called super wife. Meanwhile, I was feeling more tired and desperate. When she started working as a personal trainer, it got even harder for me. I knew she was good at it, but I also sensed that some of her clients had other intentions. I felt like I was letting her be taken advantage of. Lance chuckled. I never said any of this back then. I should have talked to her, but I didn't. Maybe if we had paid more attention to the right advice, things might have been different, but... His expression turned serious. That neighborhood. I can't blame them for everything. Nora did for a while, just like she tried to blame you and me. I can hold them responsible for a lot, though, including what happened before. Moving there was one of our worst choices. Everyone seemed so helpful, but it often wasn't in a good way. He looked at me. You probably didn't see much of that until the end. Most of their advice for you turned out well. If you had stayed longer until you had a serious girlfriend, or even worse, a wife, I think you might have ended up like us. We were meant to be a team, but their advice and our willingness to follow it. He was right. Up until the end, Their advice to me had mostly seemed good. How do you mean? Lance leaned in closer over the table, tilting his head toward me. Let me ask you something. Outside of parties or social events, how often did you see the men and women of King's Forest interacting? Like the Alvarez's game night or the bowling team that Bill started? Anything else? I thought for a moment. No, I don't think so. Exactly. The husbands and wives rarely spent time together. Even when they were in the same room, it was different. At gatherings, the couples would arrive together and leave together. But during the event, the men stayed with the men, and the women stayed with the women. Some joked about how much you helped Nora in the kitchen. Or did you not notice that? I did notice, but I didn't think much about it. My parents could be like that too. I was used to it. It just seemed silly, and no one said much to me about it, so... He nodded. Trust me, if you had gotten married, they would have pushed that idea more. Since you're the youngest, they probably saw you as a kid, and kids can help out with chores. After thinking about that for a moment, I agreed. Yeah, I can believe that. I remember at poker nights how some of them didn't seem to value their partners. I tried to laugh it off back then, thinking maybe I was just being too sensitive, but I understand. And according to Nora, the women were even more critical. They talked about how men needed gentle guidance and often didn't ask directly for what they wanted, instead hinting at it and then smoothing things over later if needed. He scoffed. That Julia Alvarez took that idea too far. Did you know she even told Nora she could be unfaithful after seeing her with that guy? He doesn't need to know, as long as he's happy. What a strange thought. I get Bob's reasons for wanting to hide things given his situation, and Mary's too. Even people like Sam Henderson who made choices that mixed everything up and wanted to avoid issues for us. I don't agree with them, but I understand. But do you know how many of the women said, take care of what you need to, or ignored the problem until it all came to a head? Not that some of the guys were much better. They just kept their own struggles to themselves. He took a moment to gather his thoughts, then said, You know what really bothers me, though? What? I think most of them meant well. It was how they were taught. It was what helped keep their relationships together, even if they complained. They thought it was best for us. Some of it was just the way things were passed down, and some was about their personal issues, but very few of them tried to hurt us on purpose. None of them were messing with our lives for fun. Take Bob Grayson, for example. I know he felt a lot of regret about everything. He came to me a few years later, almost falling to his knees, asking for my forgiveness for what he did. I had just enough therapy by then to accept his apology. It felt like a huge relief for him. He really did mean well. Most of them did. Some were just looking out for themselves, but the others honestly believed this was the best way to help us. Isn't that troubling? Very troubling, I replied. Lance chuckled. Yeah, right. His smile turned thoughtful. I really cared about her, you know. If I could change one thing, it would be that we never moved there. But we did, and we tried to meet the expectations. She wanted to be the perfect partner, and I focused only on work, even after things got better for my business, and we stopped working as a team. In a way, we were even competing against each other. All we really needed was to talk openly, and maybe... He shook his head. Well, it is what it is. If we hadn't moved, we probably wouldn't have divorced, and I wouldn't have met Kylie. Lance raised his left hand and moved the ring on his finger. And then I wouldn't have Alex or Samantha. Worrying about what could have been won't make you happier, you know. My wife does, though, and my kids do. Even Nora feels that way now. Once we sorted things out in family counseling, she's been a wonderful co-parent, and she and Kylie get along really well. I sat there in surprise for a moment, then said, Really? Wow, that's wonderful. He laughed at my response. I know. It seems hard to believe, but it's true. It took her some time to truly accept her part in this, but once she did, that's where the name change came from. Nora feels so upset by what Ella did that she can't stand the name anymore. She's not denying her past. She takes responsibility for it. But she needed a way to move on, and that felt like a good start. Even before that, she really tried to make things right. Once she realized that the advice she'd followed had led her here, she stopped listening to those who said that causing stress around my work was the way to win me back. It seemed like a strange idea, especially since I didn't have a workshop or factory. What could she really sell? My contact list? A couple of laptops? It was just another example of the wrong ideas they put in her head. We came up with a fair plan. It was tough for me financially, but Nora didn't want to cause trouble. She never held any bad feelings, you know? She was just hurt by everything. I'm sure you've heard something like this before. I tried to copy Caitlin's voice in a light-hearted way, saying, "Why can't we move on? It was just a moment. I only cared about you." Lance laughed and replied, "Yeah, that sounds familiar. Anyway, once she got past that part, we worked together for a while to help her stand on her own. We made her role as a personal trainer into something more professional and full-time. Because of that, she became more flexible about visits and finances. It was a give-and-take situation, you know. Now our lives are connected, and they always will be. I still support her, and I wouldn't do any less. Sometimes we might disagree about the kids, but we can manage it. Hunter is 18 now, and Zoe just turned 16. They have their own opinions, and we try to listen. That has really helped. Honestly, I think we get along better now than we did for most of our marriage. What about dealing with a stepdad? Did she ever remarry?" A familiar voice answered from behind me. "No, I never did. Lance set the bar pretty high." Two women walked by, one leaning over to greet Lance while the other took the seat next to mine. "Hey, Doug. Long time no see." If Lance had aged well, Nora looked almost unchanged. She looked amazing. If I were meeting her for the first time, I might think she was in her mid-30s instead of her early 40s. She still looked fit, though today she wore a sundress instead of workout clothes. Yeah, it's nice to see you." Nora laughed at my awkward question, a playful smile on her face as she said, "It's nice to see you too?" Then her expression softened. "Honestly, it really is good to see you, Doug. I have so much I want to tell you. When Lance messaged that you were here, Kylie and I rushed right over." Lance added, "Doug, this is my wife, Kylie." A slender, pretty woman about his age with dark brown hair smiled and waved as she settled next to him. "I've heard a lot about you, Doug. Lance has always praised you and what you did for him." She nodded toward Nora. "For them. It's nice to meet you, too." Her words suddenly registered. "Wait, really?" I turned to Lance's ex-wife. "I got his gratitude, but hers?" Nora said, "Yes, Doug, really." "I know," she said, looking apologetic. "I realize I didn't treat you well back then, even before that night at our house. I put you in a tough spot, and that wasn't fair. I really appreciate you standing up and doing what was right when others didn't." She laughed lightly and continued, "I was upset with you that night and for quite a while after, but now I can't express how thankful I am. I often think about what could have happened if you had gone along with what I suggested or kept my secret. It's a scary thought." She took a deep breath. "Thank you. Truly. I mean it." I sighed, too surprised to say much and feeling emotional. For many years, I thought that night was one of my biggest failures. And now, here were the people I believed I had hurt, thanking me sincerely. Finally, I managed to say, "Thank you for that." Tears started to form in my eyes, and I quickly wiped them away. With the divorce, missing my kids, and everything else in my life, this sudden positive turn was overwhelming. I really needed this right now. A mix of comforting words like, "It's going to be okay," and "I really mean it," from the three of them made it hard to keep my calm demeanor, but I tried to hold it together. It was a close call. The women had just finished their shopping and wanted to get lunch, so we stayed at the table for another hour. It felt unreal to be sitting with these two people I thought would hold a grudge against me, chatting and laughing, sharing advice about my new life after the divorce. They even shared some gossip. Apparently, once Nora had seen things for what they truly were, she confronted the power couples in King's Forest. At the last barbecue before she moved away, knowing they would all be there, she came prepared with every secret, piece of gossip, and rumor she'd learned during her time there. Many of her comments hit home. Within a year, several for sale signs popped up around our quiet neighborhood, mostly due to the divorce laws in our state. I thought I should feel better about that, maybe even vindicated. But it made me a bit sad. I had spent years holding on to a grudge after how they treated me. And while I definitely felt that was wrong, I also remembered all the good they'd done for me before things got messy. I recalled our poker nights, fishing trips, barbecues, and the Christmas party at the Graysons. What they did to Lance and Ella and me was certainly unfair, I was sure of that. But I also remembered how much they had welcomed me into their community and how they had helped me grow in many ways. Their ways had worked for them. Why wouldn't they want to share them with younger people? But those ways didn't really work, did they? They seemed fine, but only if the world stayed the same. Only if Dorothy didn't peek behind the curtain and find the wizard was just an old man making things up. Only if the drifter didn't come to town and point out the problems they wanted to ignore so they could pretend everything was perfect. The ladies finished their lunch and we all went outside, promising to stay in touch. Lance gave me the number for a family counselor who had helped him and Nora after their divorce. Nora offered a brief gesture of warmth before we said goodbye, giving me a smile as she got into her car. The day after our meeting, she sent me a text. Nothing important, just a friendly, "How are you?" to check in. That message led to more chats and a phone call a few days later, which opened the door for even more talks. At first, we reminisced about our time at King's Forest, but she focused more on helping me adjust to my new life. A few weeks later, she surprised me with an invitation to dinner. I was curious why she was just in the neighborhood, since she lived 2 towns away. Just wanted to catch up with an old friend. We didn't try to rebuild our old friendship. That wouldn't have worked. 12 years had changed us both, especially Nora. She wanted little to do with the person she had been, holding on to her past mostly as lessons on what was important. Instead, we decided to start fresh, like clearing away old debris to build something new. Long talks, sometimes with tears, were necessary for growth. Nora had embraced honesty to move away from her past, sharing the truth even when it was tough so it wouldn't hurt later. She encouraged me to do the same, and I found it freeing. Spending time together, getting to know the new versions of ourselves, helped us create a strong bond. There were tough moments, too, where we might not speak for days. But when we calmed down, we always came to a better understanding of who we were and what we wanted from our friendship. In this sort of rebuilding, we found pieces of our past that we wanted to hold on to, things that had special meaning for us. The years since we last saw each other had shaped us into a pair that fit together perfectly. Nora had turned her personal training work into a small gym, allowing us to discuss the challenges small business owners face. We both had children. Hers were almost grown, while mine were still very young. And of course, we were both divorced. She helped me adjust to life after my divorce, sharing her thoughts about Caitlin and her behavior. My ex-wife did eventually attend counseling with me, and Nora supported me as we uncovered some truths there. We learned that Caitlin's work environment had many problems, which she had kept hidden from me. Her admiration for my independence turned into feelings of being trapped in a job she didn't like. She also expressed frustration with my strict views on loyalty, believing she would have been more understanding if circumstances were different. After some time, Caitlin started to take responsibility for her actions, at least a little. She became more willing to let the kids visit me, even admitting she could use the help. I wouldn't say I spent all my time at my old home, but I was also not completely shut out. I chose a nearby condo, which made it easier for Caitlin to agree to let the kids stay with me on weeknights now and then. Over time, this arrangement changed to something closer to a 50-50 split instead of the original plan of 2 weekends a month and 2 months in summer that the judge decided. During this period, my friendship with Nora grew stronger. While we didn't intend to become more than friends for a long time, it just happened. A little too much wine, a lingering dance, and a moment of warmth felt natural. It was delightful, yet complicated, bringing both happiness and concern. I worried that Nora still had ties to her past, and she worried that I might never fully trust her. One quiet moment together, she spoke first. "I don't want to do this." "This?" I asked. "Us. Like this." She propped herself up on one elbow. I care about you, and I think you care about me, too. I want to build something together, but we have a lot of issues to sort out. More than we can handle. Where do we go from here? Just dating? Married? What happens when we disagree? Are you going to wonder if... She shook her head. I haven't been with anyone in a very long time, and I'm so thankful for this connection with you, whatever it is. But if there isn't a future for us, I can't keep going like this. It hurts each time, and it's not good for either of us. We should stop before we risk what we do have. The silence that followed felt heavy, as if it spoke volumes. Now, I'm lying awake in the dark, unable to sleep due to jet lag. The sounds of a new city woke me an hour ago, and my body clock is keeping me from resting. 2 days after arriving, I still feel unsettled. Home is literally halfway around the world, and I should be having lunch instead of staring at the ceiling. The darkness reminded me of old memories, along with the uncertainty of what was coming next. It had been 6 years since that late-night chat with Nora, and I could still hear the sadness in her voice, the longing for a different future. Thinking about that conversation took me back to when I had met her for the second time, over lunch with her ex-husband. It brought back thoughts of my first day in my new home when I met Ella, and all the moments that built our relationship, the fears, the struggles, and the happy times we shared over the years. She was right. In a different time and place, we might have led different lives. But this was our reality, and even though I cared for her, doubts still remained. Perhaps that was not fair. People do change. I had changed, and I believed she had too. Believing is one thing, accepting is another. People are good at recognizing patterns. When twins are born, the tribe may see them as burdens because of the pressure on resources. If a certain food harms a royal child, that food becomes dangerous in their eyes. If there is a sudden rise in cats during a plague in a medieval town, they might blame the cats, not the rats they hunt. A young man learns from his elders, leading to success, but when asked to follow their advice on something wrong, he goes along with it instead. A young husband sees others succeeding and tries to be like them, not realizing that true success requires more than just appearance. A young wife strives for perfection to make her family happy, but doesn't see that the advice from older women was only somewhat helpful in their time. When she reaches her limit, like many before her, they encourage her to follow their ways, claiming it is for her family. An older man, worried that a past tragedy might repeat, convinces a community to hide a young wife's secret, unaware of the many other secrets he's safeguarding. Two people who faced tough times together, first as friends, then as enemies, and back to friends again. They circled around old misunderstandings and mixed feelings. If they didn't change, this pattern could destroy their friendship. We all find ourselves stuck in harmful routines that we fail to notice until it's too late. I had no answer for her that night. While she wasn't wrong, it didn't mean she was completely right either. I just couldn't figure out how to fix things between us. We seemed perfect for each other, even though it took a lot of effort and time to get to this point. It wasn't until the night after she left that clarity struck me. Moments later, I stepped outside to find her. Friendship, I thought, as I approached her door. She had sounded upset before I knocked, and her voice was tired. What? Friendship. That's the answer. Nora sighed, feeling worn out. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess that's what we'll be now, just friends. No. I shook my head. Not just friends. I want more too, but I don't want to get married again. I've had my kids, and I don't want to deal with the legal stuff. A piece of paper doesn't define who we are. With a deep breath, she asked, Okay, and? What's marriage? Before she could speak, I answered my own question. Besides the legal stuff, the ceremony and flowers, it's really about a lifelong friendship if you do it right. It's not dating. It's not just testing things out. It's a promise to keep this friendship strong, to work on it as needed, for as long as we can. For a lifetime, if we can be honest and love each other well. That's the question. Is this a friendship you want for life? Not dating? Not just trying things without a commitment? I don't need any paper or a ceremony. I don't want that. I don't want to let past failures or what others expect define us. I want to be your friend for as long as we live. I want our friendship to have something special just between us. She smiled through her tears. And once we commit to that, I want you to be open with me like you have been since we reconnected. I don't want to depend on unspoken hopes or vague promises to keep us happy. I don't want to get stuck in a routine that doesn't suit us, one that everyone else seems to follow. Can you? Yes. Nora's happy shout could have been heard blocks away as she hugged me tightly. Yes. I want to be your friend, your only friend for life. I want to be the person you turn to when things are tough, and I want to help you when you make mistakes. I want to... She leaned in closer, her warmth wrapping around me. I want to show you how good of a friend I can always be. Can we do that? We could. We did. We still do. There's no legal paper binding us, no rings to show our commitment, no labels to define us. If we wanted, we could walk away from each other today by simply ending our lease and sharing our book collection. What holds us together are love and honesty, and because of that, we choose to stay. We found a new way that works for us. When she needs to share an uncomfortable truth, she does it kindly. I do the same for her. Whether it's, yes, that outfit doesn't look good, or, I felt a bit flattered when that person at the gym noticed me. These honest moments that might break other relationships strengthen ours. We tackle issues before they become problems, rather than waiting until they happen, and we do this without thinking that making promises is the same as truly caring for one another. Babe? Nora's sleepy voice pulls me back to reality. You okay? Yeah, just thinking. She cuddles up to me, gently touching my chest. Try to sleep, babe. We have a busy day tomorrow. Yeah, I know, but I can't. Yawning, she asks, still feeling tired from the trip? Mostly. You should rest. We can chat tomorrow. I know we can, but I want to talk now. Come on, babe. Zoe will be upset if the mother of the bride looks worn out. Neither of us liked the idea of a destination wedding, but with Lance covering the costs, we had to go along with it. If you want me to sleep, tell me what you were thinking. Laughing, I replied, cowboy movies. Ooh. She knows the story well since we've shared so much about our pasts. We often use cowboy movies as a way to refer to that whole experience. You okay? I am. Love you. Get some sleep. Love you too. She smiled sleepily. You wore me out earlier, you know? Did I not do the same for you? Of course you did, but you know how I get when I can't sleep. She'd found out over the years. I know. Her hand gently moved across my chest. I know how to help you relax. I thought I tired you out. She playfully nudged me. You did, but I'm a little tired from the trip too. Come on. She pulled me into her embrace with a soft laugh. Let's unwind. Smiling, I gladly took her in my arms. Yes, ma'am. We enjoyed the moment together. One of my favorite things about loving wives' stories is that you never know what to expect when you start reading. Okay, to be fair, if the title has cucked by or I burned the, you might get a clue, but I believe the best stories in this category take you on an unexpected journey. Whether it ends in revenge, unique relationships, romance, or forgiveness, a good loving wives' story should keep you guessing. That's why I want to recommend a new story today. Skitten may not be a first-time writer, but she shared her first story on Literotica earlier this year in the Loving Wives section. An Evening at Crystal Lake is well written, but that's not the only reason I want to highlight it. It effectively combines the category and storyline in a way that enhances the tension. It's only about 4,000 words long, so slightly longer than a typical Literotica page. Go read it and come back. If you don't want to, here's a brief overview. A photographer husband and model wife decide to do a horror-themed photo shoot for their portfolios. They called a guy to play a scary character. When he arrived at the cabin by the lake they had rented for the filming, things started to happen. From the beginning, there was a feeling that things might not end well. The actor, dressed as the character, didn't speak and carried a fake machete. The writer focused a lot on how real the costume looked and how intimidating the character was. The location felt familiar, like something from an old horror movie, especially with the single light hanging over the dock. The main female character spent a lot of time getting ready for her part. The story had many subtle hints that suggested something unexpected might occur. This story could have worked in other types of stories, too. If it had taken a different path, like if the husband had complained, or if the character really were scary, it could have had a different feel. But putting it in those other categories might have ruined the surprise. In many of those stories, not much shocking happens. The uncertain start makes the story more interesting, as it keeps readers wondering what will happen next. When it turned out that it was just a person in a costume having fun with a willing wife and a husband who was unsure but eventually joined in, it felt like a relief. You are glad it was just three people having a good time, without anything dark behind it. The best stories in this kind often have that unexpected quality. The excitement grows because, within reason, anything could happen. Extreme events would not fit well and would likely not be allowed. Different versions of this storyline could exist, each with different endings. The most fun part? Readers would not know the ending until they got to the close, just like in this case. This might be my favorite story I've read this year, not for its themes but for how it plays with the unknown in the genre. I hope we see more from this author soon. Hey listeners of Temptress Cheating Tales. If you enjoyed hearing this story and want to stay in the loop with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next wonderful story.